Hi everyone, welcome back. So this video is more going to be about my journey with FND and probably the hardest year for me so far. So if you want to learn more about FND or you are interested to understand what it is, check my last video because that explains the basics of it. So I was admitted to Sydney Children's Hospital early June for about a week of extreme nauseousness and dizziness. I'd fainted multiple times, threw up multiple times. It wasn't very pretty and it was abnormal, so we thought it would be better to just take me in to get me checked. So when we were in there, I was taken for an MRI. While we were waiting for those MRI scans, I was admitted to the neurology ward. In there it was funny, it was like I was surrounded by babies. I was like the only older person in it. So when they finally came back with the results, it showed that I had a lesion on my thalamus. So they had thought that I had a stroke or a brain bleed. So they did further tests like blood tests and a lumbar puncture, which caused me to have an emergency CT scan from the medicine that they gave me for that. But those tests came back all clear, so they really had one other option for it to be, which was something called FND or functional neurological disorder. So once I first got that diagnosis, I was a bit hesitant to learning what it was about because the doctors made it seem like it was a diagnosis where you make it up. And I didn't want to learn about it because the doctors made me feel like I was just making the whole thing up and that it wasn't properly medical and it didn't need attention to it. But once I finally did learn what it was about, I'm really grateful that I did, because it isn't that you're making it up. It can be as debilitating as any other diagnosis. It's just understanding how it works, because it's a bit of a complicated diagnosis and you really have to understand the angle that it's coming from. After about a week in hospital, I went home after my diagnosis of FND. So maybe a couple of weeks after being home, I started having these seizure-like episodes. I'd completely just black out and nothing could wake me, and they were going on for, first of all, it started as seconds and then there were minutes and it'd just be a bit longer each time. So we thought that was not really normal, so we went back to hospital and they did an EEG where it's like they put all these probes on your head and measure your brain activity. So that came back normal. I wasn't having seizures or anything, so they put that down to FND. Just as I was about to go home, my left leg became paralysed, so I couldn't feel it or move it. This was happening on and off, like it would be paralysed and then it would come back, and that just happened multiple times until once it just completely went and I couldn't move it or feel it. So they decided to keep me in hospital to try and deal with that. So I started off in a wheelchair. I was doing physio and hospital school, but slowly during physio I worked up to walk with crutches, where I just dragged that leg behind me. So after we figured how I would function at home, I went home. So about 1 to 2 weeks after that, I completely lost the feeling in both my legs. So we dealt with it for a couple of days at home and then realised we can't function properly like this for much longer. So we called the hospital and they would say, yeah, it's better just to come in just so we can take proper care of you and you can function properly. So we went to hospital again. We were there, I think, for 2 weeks. So this was my third admission. And this time I was in a wheelchair, obviously. I was doing hospital school and physio again. So after the 2 weeks, they didn't come back. Like the feeling and movement in my legs didn't come back. So we brought the wheelchair home and we hired a shower chair so I could go home and function like that. After a couple of weeks, I was accepted into this mind-body rehab program, which is a rehab program for kids and adolescents with FND to go. So it basically consists of psychology, physiology and school to try and retrain the brain back to normal. So basically I went and did that. It was at Westmead Hospital. It's an amazing program. So I went and did that program. The first time I went, I didn't really make much physio progress just because I couldn't feel either of my legs. Like, I made a lot of psychology progress but not as much physio. So I went home, and then a couple of weeks later I actually felt I could feel my legs again after I think it was 2 months of not feeling them. So I could feel them again, which was amazing. So we decided it would be best if I redid the program again. So I went back and I did the 2-week program again, and this time I made so much physio progress. I took my first steps, I could walk upstairs, and I think I could walk around 10 metres in one hit, which was amazing for me. So after that, the second time at the program, I went home, being able to walk, do all of that. So I began going for walks, doing some exercise, trying to get my exercise, my fitness back up and going back to normal life and how I was actually doing it beforehand. And then it came around Christmas time, so I was actually able to complete my Christmas goal of standing up for a Christmas photo we always take on Christmas Eve, which really made me happy. But then I think it was on the 4th of January, or it was early January, I actually lost the feeling in both of my legs again, which sort of got me down a bit, because every time I lose the feeling in my legs, I get really weak again. So I was like, oh, did I just do all of that training and working for nothing? So luckily after a couple of days they came back, and now I'm really just trying to work on that strength again and try and get it back to normal. So yeah, that's my story of this year and last year so far. I just want to say thank you to everyone who has helped me and supported me through this tough time. Thank you everyone, and just remember that you're not alone.